Okay, so let's move on to actually uploading and downloading files. We just have the plumbing in place, a foundation, so to speak. Here we have our model class for file store and a view model that's the same without the content. And what else? Well, we took time to create the separate migrations for the actual project uh, models as opposed to the identity security system. But let's just carry on. So let's add a controller. Instead of replacing the home controller like I did in my last demo, I'll just add a new one for the files. So yeah, using the file upload entities, I'll create it based on my file store model class. And I think I'll just call it file controller. That'll work. Okay. So this will create the controller and corresponding views according to the standard TT templates for any framework, MVC5, etc., etc., etc. So familiar looking, we have a DB object, right? A file upload entities object giving us our data context. Our index just returns to list all the file stores, etc., etc. So we'll start actually working with the index view and we'll add code there so that we can actually upload a file back. So let's do that. Come down to views, file, index. And really, truth is much of the functionality out of the standard template here is workable. The one thing that we do have to take control of instead is the create process because we actually have to upload the file and then stream the data out of it. So I'll take out this link for the create action link. And maybe there's a good spot to actually put my little HTML form that I'm going to use right here instead. So we'll just throw that in, right? So it's just a little begin form here, HTML helper. Using that, I've added because in my class I made room for a description. So I just have a input for the file description and a little label to go in front of it. And you can clean this up, make it look better. This is an introductory basic layout. So we have a file upload one. That was right out of another tutorial I found. So that's my input for actually submitting a file. Notice we can only do one at a time with one of these tags. So I'll just safely go on the assumption I'm just uploading one file at a time. Submit button, away we go. So the submit button will submit back to my same controller, right? My file controller. And that's where then I'll need to respond in the index to a post, right? Because this, of course, is set up for a get, which is the default. So I'm going to do something similar. Most of ours are paired down here, right? So we'll have something like this, HTTP post, and then we'll specify how a post should be handled. You remember from that first tutorial that I asked you to work through, it talked about how the fact that we can have two action results with the same name as long as the signature of the method is different. In other words, different arguments to pass in here. So I can reuse index. Notice I've got the attribute for HTTP post, but as long as I put code in here that makes the signature different, I don't have a conflict. Otherwise, I will. So I'll make a string, I guess, to hold the file description. The rest of the data I'll actually pull from the file itself, right? So on a post then, what I'm going to do is, let me get rid of this, and we're going to come in here, we're going to add some code in order to process and store the actual file. So it's going to end up looking very much like my PowerPoint, in fact, quite on purpose, I should hope, right? It'll come out the same. And here we are, right? So, oh, I have to add a using, control period, system IO. All right, that should give me all the power I need. So it's just like in my PowerPoints here, we grab the content type, the file name with path get file name, the content length so we know how far to read it. Just a quick logical test to make sure we actually have both a name and some data in the file and the content. And then we actually stream it, pulling all the data out with reading from the stream. And now we have all the information stored in these little variables. So I can create an actual file store object. And as I do so, assign in the data from my different variables. So I'm storing the description, the name, the MIME type, and of course that byte array of data that actually represents the file content. So with my new object, my file store object, I just add that to the DB set, save changes, and bada bing. That's it. It's as simple as that using Entity Framework. Very, very nice clean code compared to a lot of other approaches you'll find online. Afterwards, we'll just redirect back to the index action, which of course we'll just call this and we'll get on our list again, right? Now I'll make further changes in here, but for now, let's leave it like that and just see how this actually functions. So I'll bring this up. I guess Chrome is what I'm using. All right, not a problem. And here we go. All right, takes a moment to run, especially the first time, as usual, right? So here's my little form where I can type in a description, choose a file. Let's go find something. Here's a nice horsey picture. Well, maybe I'll take this one. Okay, open that. Two horses at gate and upload. You could make that create if you want, whatever. And it takes a little while to send that up. But you know, the truth is, it actually sent it up very, very fast. What took so long was pulling it out because, oh, remember, I didn't change this yet. So it's actually showing me there's that byte array, right? Let me scroll way over, way, way over. Oh, it's a pretty big byte array, right? Quite a large graphic. And there's the MIME type and the file name, and there's my description. So this highlights the problem. That byte array is not very useful, okay, in terms of showing it on this page, as you can see. Now there's some tricks in code I'll show you later on to actually show it if it is an image. But for the most part, usually in a index list like this, we just want to see a list of the names and maybe the types of the files in the system. We don't have to try and see the content. So that would be probably the next thing I'd do. Now, for now, let me just take it out by removing that from the view. So let me come into here to my index view. Stop running, sorry. That's trouble with Google. So I can just take out this content, take out that column altogether, and there we go. Actually, I don't know why, but I would like the file name first, come to think of it. List that first, maybe then the type and then the description. You know what, actually? Why even show the MIME type on the list, right? Why don't I have that come up in details when you look at details? So I'm going to take out the MIME type as well. Arbitrary decision? Yeah. Do I like it? Yeah. Okay. All right. So there I can upload files and now I'll see the list much more quickly. Let me run that again just to see the difference so far. It should come up a lot more quickly. Well, of course, it's still pulling the data, even though it doesn't have to download it technically through HTTP, but it still had to pull it up just to get this list of information, the file name and the description, two horses at a gate, right? Let's pick another one. Horse running in snow. Okay, see that? It was a lot faster this time refreshing because I'm not showing the content, right? Even though it actually is still pulling it from the database. So that does prove a point that it takes a long time to actually get the content down here into the view. Okay, good enough. I should point out that, delete and details still kind of work. Now, of course, if I go to details, I will once again find it a slow process because we are pulling all the data, the content, right? Very, very slow. So again, if I were to remove that, the content, it would come up much faster. Better yet still is not to even ask for the content. Before I get rid of it altogether though, let me just show you one of the things, one of the approaches, sometimes, especially with images, we do like to see them. And so what I can do, I wouldn't actually do it this way, but you'll find some tutorials referencing this, so I might as well explain it, and you can decide when you should or shouldn't use the technique. Um, so that's fine. We have our two index action results that allow us to now upload files. And I'm going to throw a bit of code in here. This is one method for actually being able to show data. This is a very crude brute force method. But it is actually functional. So let me just throw it in. Somewhere in here, I'm going to add a new method to my controller. See, it's just void. It doesn't actually return any type, show, because it directly works with the response object. right? So it's kind of stepping outside of the good behaved rules for normal MVC code and saying, you know what, I can do this because I'm a big brute and I'm going to just take control of everything. So we have our simple link query where we're pulling our, if we pass in an ID, we pull that one file store object, which has all the content out. And just by setting the buffer to true, so we don't just start sending it right away, we set that to true, clear the buffer, response, I should say, set the MIME type of the response, and then binary write the file content. So this method, show method, when called from the controller, if we pass it an ID, will actually return in a binary string the content of the actual uh, file, right? So how would we use this? Let's come back to my index page. Let's suppose I did want a column where I show it, right? Well, maybe I'll grab this and we'll stick a third column back in again. Um, oop, what did I do? I think I did that wrong. Okay, yes, that's what I want. So just basically this is a new heading row, table header row. I'll just hard code something in here. Uh, Image preview. Okay, so down here we'll actually add a column. Okay, into our table data tag. Now, I can't just use a display for. That's what we had earlier, and that didn't work. So what instead I'm going to do is put a little bit of code here. Basically, we're having an image tag. Now, of course, this isn't going to work so well for a Word document, but we'll deal with that at a later date. We can just use this URL action, and basically we're calling the show method. Oh, I got to change this. I previously had this in a home controller, so this is my file controller, right? Passing in the item ID, so we have the ID, and I'm just going to predefine a height and width, of course, which isn't a good practice for efficiency. We should actually make sure the graphic is that size, but hey, that's another discussion for another day for you web gurus. But let's just see the effect of this now that I've added these two things, this show method in my controller and URL action that calls it. So I think I have a couple images in here right now, and we should actually then, of course, it's going to be slow. Set there, there we go. So we see the actual image previews here. Now let's just choose a different kind of file, something that won't work. Um, let's throw up a Word document, right? So you see we don't get an actual file image because a Word document doesn't actually display as a image in an image tag in HTML. Right? So if you can live with that, if they're almost all images, then you can do code something like that. Really not keen on, especially in a list like this because of the performance issue. So let's actually kind of take a step back. We're going to remove this column altogether, and I'm going to actually change the code. So instead of retrieving from the database all the file content along with each file's record, we'll make good use of our view model instead, and we'll see the performance difference that we get.